All right, hey guys, welcome to another episode of Fuck Ups and Success. Today we have with us ADG, also known as Adrian Galea. You've probably heard of him through the Malta Startup Space and seen a couple of interesting things that he's been posting around. A couple of weeks ago, we came together and organized the startup stories that we've been posting over the past few weeks. Today, actually, Adrian's in Malta from Barcelona, so I just took the opportunity to meet up with him this week and really looking forward to introducing him to the community and also everybody getting to know him on a more personal level as well as his story and what his whole goal is with the Malta Startup Space. So welcome, Adrian, to the studio. How are you doing?
Everything's fine, thanks. I'm a big fan of the show. I've been following the different episodes. I think everyone has brought in some very interesting insights and hope to contribute my own today.
Super. You've obviously back in Malta this week, good to be back on the rock.
Yeah, I came here for family reasons, sister's wedding, pandemic permitting, of course. Lovely time to meet up with the family, especially the young ones. Happy to see Malta, of course. Still not good enough for long swims, but I'll be back soon.
Cool. So before we get into more maybe personal questions, I think everybody's just itching to know what have you been doing with the Malta Startup Space and what's the story behind this?
Yeah, Malta Startup Space was a group on Facebook that was managed by the guys at Meta who are running the accelerator. And for reasons I won't get into, Meta decided to discontinue the accelerator program, and they were going to close down this group, which was followed by circa 1,000 people in Malta, people interested in startups. And I thought it was too good of an opportunity to have an audience that is already has taken a step towards being interested in startups. So as from January, I took it over in terms of moderation, so I don't do much other than post every now and again and comment on various comments. But since January, the group has gone from 1,000 to 1,700. The rate of comments has kind of exploded, and we're looking at many more people contributing. You're starting to see even, for example, today, quite a known personality join the group. You have business leaders joining. You have members, not members of government, but like people from important positions like at Malta Enterprise joining, Chamber of Commerce. So it seems to be generating interest around startups, and the whole point was to create a constant drip feed of startup information, startup talk. And I'll just finish with this point. In the past, I used to feel that startups happened in March and happened in October. Why? Because there were some European initiatives around startups, and that's when we'd have our events around startups. The point of Malta Startup Space is to talk every day about startups. Some days are more busy than others, but that's what I believe will build a grassroots and a bottom-up movement in favor of innovation and startups and entrepreneurship in general in Malta. We already have a sense of entrepreneurship, but where does that fit in with the tech world, with the internet world? And that's maybe the dimension I add.
That's it. I think communities have become a really important part of organizations. But this one's more of like an informal space for all entrepreneurs. There's no real organization behind it. It's a place for people to meet other entrepreneurs and startups, get information. But of course, do you have an interest in communities, in building communities, or their importance in today's world?
Yeah. So if you look at internet-based economies, one of the biggest assets there is building an audience. Why? Because you create a following around your personal brand, your idea. If you look at internationally, Tim Cook, CEO of Apple, has more followers than Apple. Take sports. You have LeBron James has more followers than the NBA or than the LA Lakers. So personal branding has exploded on the internet because people are interested in people, not institutions. And building an audience is a very, very important asset that I don't think many people understand. And for me personally, Malta Startup Space has allowed me to build my audience. And then let's take someone like you who's building startups. How are you utilizing Malta Startup Space, for example?
That's it. I see it as a place for me to go with my ideas, meet people who are like-minded, also get feedback from these kind of things. But then as well, there's the thing you mentioned, which is your reputation, kind of thing. So Malta Startup Space is very focused into an area which I enjoy a lot, which is startups and entrepreneurship. So it's the perfect niche for me to promote myself. So by doing this podcast, I want people to start thinking Luca and startups. I want to make that connection. But of course, it's not just limited to that niche group. I'm also active in other niche groups outside of startups and entrepreneurship, which have more to do with Decentraland, one of the startups I work on, for example. So for sure, I see that as an important part of being active in the community. As far as activity, though, like you said, it's increased a lot, but has it increased enough?
Yeah, so basically, when I joined, I think kind of other than the updates and the important points that were brought by the Meta accelerator managers, that's what only generated activity. So when I took it up, a post will get 3 likes, 4 likes, just a few comments, maybe 1 or 2. I think now, certain posts, you probably have a better score rating than I do on some points, but you get 40 comments, 45 people having conversations about theories, abstract theories, sometimes about technology, sometimes about deep thoughts, not just frivolous things around tech and stuff like that. So people, I believe, are having conversations. That was my personal North Star, that they're not just selling and buying, but they're having conversations. And then you have to be careful, okay? So to answer your question, like there were some posts recently that purposely tapped into a controversial point. And that generated a hell of a lot of comments. Why? Because they reacted to the commentary. And that's social media for you, right? People kind of react instinctively to negativity, or maybe something with a slight of a negative bias. So my personal brand, it's all about education, what we call edutainment, trying to have fun with it, keep it lighthearted, few jokes around startups, inspirational posts, to keep positive aspects going on. But there are many ways to play the game, but kind of one of the things I really want to work on is that so far, if you look at the data, only about 10% of the community posts. Now, there's a positive spin and a negative spin. The negative spin is obvious, like we want more people to feel at home and to engage and to feel free to talk, right? Obviously, unfortunately, it's a bit of a common occurrence. There's more male participation than there's female, although I think we have some good, very interesting comments being posted by female leaders and female entrepreneurs. And
actually, I think the female entrepreneurs are more connected and more supportive of each other in Malta at the moment right now, because they have these. They have I think it's called She. That community is very active.
Yeah, so Sarah has her own community and doing great things in her community. She also posts every now and again on the community. And there's also Audrey, who's a co-administrator on Malta Startup Space. She works tirelessly for startups through Malta Enterprise. But she also posts and comments and gives updates, very, very active and hands-on. Sometimes you say these government workers just clock their 9 to 5. That's not Audrey. She puts her heart and soul in it.
So how could, members of the group become more involved, become more active? What do they need to do? I obviously comment more, like things more. I guess I'm asking it because it's like sometimes I wonder, before I started commenting, I was afraid, I was afraid to comment because I don't know if I know enough things, which nobody knows enough things, but we're not sure if my opinion matters. And it's kind of like you have to break that ice.
Yeah, the low-hanging fruit is comment on other people's posts, right? So like that, you're reactive, not proactive. And then when you have an idea, you can post. I had to learn how to post because when I moved from Malta to Madrid, Madrid, by the way.
Because I said Barcelona.
Yeah. When I moved from Malta to Madrid, initially, I was in between jobs, trying to figure stuff out. And I said, let me really embrace this digital world. And embracing that digital world also included trying to build a personal brand initially through LinkedIn. So I learned how to comment, I learned how to post, always analyzing your last month, trying to make sure month on month you're improving by that 5-6%, to keep adding an audience. Then that led me to other things in my professional life that maybe we'll get into later. But yes, you have to be a bit happy-go-lucky and just go for it. I don't think a post on Facebook is going to damage you so thoroughly, but You never know.
I'm dreaming about this summer. I'm dreaming that regulations are lifting, the vaccines are going to work, the variants are not going to have any problems. That's what I'm hoping is going to happen. So it could be that there's an opportunity to organize an in-person event. Like, would you consider maybe doing something for the community, like a poker tournament, or rather than just a stand-up drinks at a bar or at a restaurant?
Look, my intention is to remain as operationally low-key as possible. I mean, I have full-time commitments, which really take up my brain power as well as my time. So, like, personally for Adrian, I'd say I'll join, but I won't organize. But the idea of Malta Startup Space is to allow people a platform to play with this. There's an audience of 1,700 people into startups. If you want to create a brand for yourself, for your company, and reach out to people, I think you have an opportunity waiting for you right there. On a more personal note, I want to be internet first and digital first. So I am exploring all these digital tools that there are out there and trying to find the right avenues for what I want to build. I might remain, a talking head on the internet, but intentionally.
Just I mean, you mentioned a number of things, like calculating that you have 5% on your views, and you're like, you seem like quite an analytic person. Have you always been that way?
No, I just think that's the right way to do things. Actually, I love creativity. We were taught from young kids to love sports, love arts. I'm a sucker for talent. Sometimes it really seeps through individuals. And you see that even in the STEM world and in the technology world, sometimes some people are just there, they just get it more or just more intuitive. But there's a way of building things and being accountable for your efforts, making sure you maximize return on over time. These are things I've built up, like good habits. And yes, I check my work, I make sure month after month I'm one step in a better direction.
Could I ask you something like, who were you at 16? What did you expect, your 20s and your 30s and your 40s to look like? Obviously, you're still in your 30s, right?
Yeah, 36.
36. So, what was it? What was your thoughts of your future compared to how things panned out?
No, so in my teens, early 20s, sun, fun, and games. Like, we have this beautiful island in Malta where people come here to have a good memory, and I kind of embraced that. I used to work for language schools, taking around the students to the different bars and beaches and sites. I had the time of my life, to be quite honest, getting paid to go to the beach and have fun. Please inform me if there's a better job in the world. So I was never one of these like super entrepreneurial minds, like from a young age, not at all. What happened to me is that when I started getting to my mid-20s, I started working, full-time in an office. I'm an accountant, and what I noticed is that my knowledge could actually help businesses do better. And like if you look at my transition, I went from audit, where it's historically looking at businesses, so you can't really help them, you can just check their books. I moved to a law firm because there you're helping them set up the corporate setups, doing tax structuring, doing some legal checks, helping businesses invest. So you're starting to be on the side of the entrepreneur, helping them as a professional, until when I joined a startup called Go Beyond, which had an office in Hamroon, a very small office. So I went from the corporate world to a tiny startup, where we were hand in hand with investors investing in startups on a daily basis. And kind of when I got introduced to this world of early stage startups, of entrepreneurs building out of tech, tech first solutions, I fell in love with it, because I thought it was the most interesting thing I had ever seen. And like getting out of my 20s into my 30s, I'm like, that's where I want to steer the direction. So when the opportunity came for Go Beyond, like my only question in the interview was, do you really do startups 100%? And the answer was yes. They don't do marketing and then a little bit of startups. They just do startups. We just invest in startups. And over my time there, 5 years, we ourselves raised 4.5 million euro in capital from business angels and family offices. But we also invested 25 million euro in early stage startups around Switzerland and Europe. And I got to meet, we had a portfolio of 100 startups. So I got to meet entrepreneurs from pretty much all over Europe, including some of the US, helping them, build their businesses. We were the first money in, so we were doing due diligences. I used to be helping investors. Now, to be an early stage investor in a startup, that's play money. So to invest 50K, 100K in a startup, you need to have quite a lot of capital out there. So these are business leaders, CEOs or C-level people investing in startups. And I was there coaching them on how to build their portfolio in a startup, little me from Malta. So it was too excited not to be part of this world. So now I'm in my mid-30s. I've moved on now to venture capital. So basically, instead of writing checks of 100K to 100K, now we're writing checks of 2 million, 3 million. And, the startups are more global, people talk about unicorns, we're actively trying to build unicorns, So my journey was from happy-go-lucky kid on the beach to seeing that, knowledge gives you power and ability to help people, because that's the core of my thesis, like how can I help and how can I add most value? So then finding a way to do that through investments in startups. Why? Because I'm not a builder myself, but I feel I'm great at helping people build their stuff. And I've managed to do that at Go Beyond. We had revenue of more than €1 million, had more than 800 business angels investing through our platform. And now again, through Bitcraft. Bitcraft is a $165 million US fund that's investing in digital games and digital entertainment. Did I know what I was doing? No, but apparently the skills I've acquired over time seem to have certain value. And my favorite thing about Bitcraft today is that at Go Beyond, before I left, I used to feel, and this is just me, of course, I used to feel like I was the smartest guy in the room. Now, at Bitcraft, I'm clearly the dumbest guy in the room. And it's fantastic because the growth path is enormous for me, and I'm very excited for the next few years ahead for myself.
So yeah, it seems like you like to move from a place where you're comfortable, where you kind of know it all, to a more uncomfortable spot. And
yeah, no, I think spot on. Like, as in, do I do it intentionally? Not that much. I think for me personally, it's just genuinely I'm interested in the space. And like one of the first things I learned at Go Beyond in terms of the culture was one of the sayings of the investors, like especially the core clique of investors that there were, was if it's not risky, I'm not interested. And when I learned that, like, it opened my eyes to a whole new world, because I was coming from the corporate world, risk management, regulation, can't do this, can't do that. And all of a sudden you have these people who see opportunity and get excited. And like, there's a nice segue into like the Maltese culture as a comparison, that, you want assured returns or you want predictable outcomes. Actually, what we learn in the entrepreneurship world is that opportunities where uncertainty is, and that uncertainty is which can cause the massive returns to happen. Like if you look at the massive startups that there are globally, one lets you rent your property to a complete stranger. The other one lets you jump into a car with a complete stranger, and these have been the revolutionary startups of the last few years. Huge risk there, Actually, logic will tell you don't do that, but that's where the returns were. So I had to relearn many things.
So you're a VC basically. This term is thrown around, but often like VCs and investment. Like having that experience and knowing that experience, that knowledge is quite unique, especially for a small island in Malta with its budding scene. Does that kind of motivate you to do this kind of work with the Malta Startup Space as well, to bring that kind of mindset? So
I have a friend of mine who's studying to be a coach. So we do like pro bono sessions, and that's what all the discussion is all about. Why do I kind of continue contributing my time? It's not a lot of time now, because to post every day and to just answer a few comments, it's what people used to do in a cigarette break. I do on Facebook. So don't think it's operationally heavy at all. But I'm Maltese, you want to help the economy, you see things where you have certain knowledge where you can contribute. You become a bit of an activist to a certain degree, entrepreneurship activist. I mean, there are people doing much more bold things than I for the island. But my mini world, you know, that sense, maybe a psychologist will explain it, but for me it's just helping others, like no other motivation.
Recently in the group there was there was a lot of hot discussions about funding for startups in Malta, the whole ecosystem as a whole. You've also written a number of articles about Maltese businesses and how they should be and how difficult it is to kind of get access to that kind of capital. Would you like to expand on those thoughts and this discussion that's been going on in the past few weeks?
It's a difficult one, because you're looking at an Asian here, right? So it's much easier when you're looking at a private company or a fund to really understand why things happen. But kind of my 2 cents is that over the last 10, 15 years, and I looked at the GDP numbers quite recently, we had double-digit growth, you know, in the economy. And if you invested in a property and you earn double-digit growth, that's basically beating the stock market, right, in general terms. So if we have 100K to put into an investment, why take that massive risk if Malta's experiencing all this growth? And in fact, we've seen a lot of new buildings go up, and that's the reason why, right? You're getting pretty much a safe bet on return. So, you know, usually something's strongest asset is also it's negative in a certain way. So the fact that the economy was booming so much meant that attention to long-term innovation projects, people were distracted, you know, and obviously trying to capture the moment. Maybe we put aside investment into STEM resources, you know, engineers and computer science. And also in terms of investment, you know, what makes for a good investment? You know, your bonds and your real estate. So that ability to take investment risks isn't there. It's another component that I think is missing is existing success stories that have created a second generation of people wanting to build stuff, right? So like the classic example here is, if I'm not mistaken, Estonia, where Skype kind of created a wonderful ecosystem for engineers because of what they call the Skype mafia. Meaning that the next generation, like the head of marketing or the head of growth or the head of tech, they go on to build the next startup. Why? Because they got this incredible amount of knowledge from their previous success, you know, a unicorn, so $1 billion startup success, bought out by Microsoft, I don't know for how much, that they go on to do the next thing. And we haven't really seen that in that big bang moment, so to say. But what we're starting to see are small elements of it. So some of the more interesting startups I get are people who used to be head of marketing of one of the gaming companies, or, you know, head of growth or CFOs who recognize a gap in the market at the big market levels, you know, or bigger markets than Malta, so at least at the regional European level. And they take chances, you know. And then because they did good work in these bigger companies, you know, they've built a network and they can find investors to do that. But they're few and far between, right? So we don't have a systemic way of doing this. It's still very random and haphazard how these startups emerge. And then similar so on the investment side, right? Like I mentioned before, in order to make an early stage investment, so to put even 10K, but let's say 50K in a startup, you know, that needs to be 5 to 10%, not, you know, 5% of your portfolio of holdings, disregarding your own residential property. So that means, okay, in basic terms, you need to be a multimillionaire, you know? So again, how many multimillionaires are there in Malta who have an interest in technology, who want to give back to the community, who want to see something built? So you're starting to look at very small numbers. Where the opportunity always was for Malta is people who use Malta as a leverage point for other businesses, either as a holding company or for now, you know, some side hustles and things like that. And of course, the family businesses, you know, who have built wealth over time and now understand digital disruption is coming their way and look to the startup world. But we haven't been able to tap into these resources in a systemic way. That's the trick, in a systemic way. One-offs, of course, there have been good stories that happened, but in a systemic way, I haven't done it. So we need to start building the pillars to be able to do that. And so at a government level, Europe in general has these systems where you have a centralized pot of funds, and then they give them to institutions to invest. So in Malta, we saw that through Malta Enterprises. There are the schemes, which are, to my point, very interesting for very early stage startups. And then you have incubators like Meta was, like KBIC is, and like Takeoff that are using, essentially government money to try and build a startup ecosystem. But what has been lacking is the private institutions coming into the game. And recently we saw the emergence of Basement to Boardroom, Pichora, which is basically doing just that, getting private money to take chances in a couple of startups or a handful of startups to really give them the full power of their network to build those startups. And this is the first of its kind. So I'm quite excited about that initiative. So, but the idea is we need to try and think of this in a systemic way. So you do have startups. So I don't know for certain, but for example, we have Ebo, if I'm not mistaken, managed to raise capital. I don't know whether from Maltese or foreign investors. There's a company called Weaver that raised 3 million in the UK. So there's another company called Tot3D that were able to find angel investors. So again, there are situations that have emerged that have created opportunities for investment, but it's not systemic. So the startups that have been successful, like Hotjar and Altaro, have done it in what is known as bootstrapping, meaning that they figure it out for themselves. What I'm hoping is that those successes will spill over engineers or computer scientists or company builders anyway, who want to build something new, and because of their relation to these successful companies, investors will take a chance because they say, I have a traditional business, I know the future is tech, I know the future is digital, I don't understand this, and I need to do it by extension through startups. And they build a portfolio of startup investments so that they can educate themselves and learn on how to be part of the space. But it's building blocks, it cannot be a big bang.
Yeah, you actually we had a small chat about different levels of startups and mostly tech startups. How you describe them as the application layer?
Yeah, so when you, again, oversimplifying, of course, but when you look at technology, there are essentially 3 layers that are built. So you have the protocol layer, think about let's take a car, for example. So the chassis is the protocol layer, on this foundation of what everything is built. Then you have the infrastructure layer, so think the engine, the thing that makes it go. And then you have the final overlay, which is the application layer. All right, so in Malta, we have of each kind, okay? So application layer, for example, I'll tell you 3 hour, where it's relatively low tech, but it's quick to market. So if I was an investor in an application layer startup, I would want to see traction very fast. And 3 hour was able to do that, They went up to 20,000 followers, not even double that at this point, and they have basically dominance over the Gen Z network in Malta, at least the student population in Malta. Very, very, very powerful. We spoke about audience before. They have an audience, so that's a good way of doing the application layer. The next layer is like the infrastructure layer, right? So you need a bit more tech here. So Altaro, Hotjar, they built based on tech, but even in other fields, right? So Tot3D, they built it in manufacturing, right? And in 3D printing. There's another startup, not very well known. It's called Flask. They kind of built an offshore battery. It's very technical, so apologies if I get it wrong. It's an offshore battery to regulate the energy used on oil rigs, right? They got some help from Metzev, if I'm not mistaken, to build a pilot. But unfortunately, they needed to go overseas. But these guys won international competitions, spinning out of the University of Malta. And they did a successful pilot. They won international competitions. Then they came back to Malta and saying, okay, we did our job. Now who's going to invest? And unfortunately, they kept on knocking on doors. And they ended up at probably the top European accelerator for energy business in Europe. So great infrastructure story. Unfortunately, there were no investors there to receive the call.
So when they came back to Malta, they were looking for investment locally and it didn't.
You didn't find why. Back to my point, there isn't a systemic way to get to the right investors, right? Maybe there isn't a sufficient pool of investors yet, but there isn't a way for them to kind of go through the motions so that they find investors at the end of the tunnel. But they did their job as an entrepreneur, now they have to do, and they unfortunately left Malta.
Is it reasonable for me to say, like why are these companies not household names? Why don't we celebrate them enough?
That's another important point, and kind of my journey with Malta Startup Space is step 1 of that. Step 2 is but let's take this podcast. Like, you're celebrating entrepreneurship, right? Through this podcast, you're giving a voice to people who don't normally get in a more public eye. So we need to tell these stories. Like, so, for example, looking at my posts on social media, the ones that get the most reactions are when I announce a transaction of a startup raising money through Malta Enterprise. Recently, Altaro exited, explosion of activity on my personal socials. Weaver raised 3 million, explosion of activity, or re-announce a partnership between I wouldn't call them a startup, Anchovy and PwC. A lot of activity. So people are very interested in the transactional side of startups. When deals happen, people are excited in terms of the business community, want to know what's going on. But there's no one really out there not to announce, because the startups announce, but who is the person creating that ripple effect?
The megaphone. Who
exactly,
has the
megaphone, that's the word. So that's what this phase 2 of this is. When there are transactions, I want to make sure that there are enough people creating that megaphone effect. And even so that foreign investors start getting an interest, right? So if Malta comes up on your feed, whether it's through socials, emails, WhatsApp, whatever, on a regular basis, then you start paying attention. Say, okay, what's going on in that?
Isn't it like booking a holiday? You're going to Google Madrid, things to do in Madrid. Whilst an investor
SEO
would say,
and all that stuff comes in, yes. Like a company that does this well is Ibo of Jojegat. So he's really good at kind of building a network, kind of behind the scenes, but also marketing about his successes. So every time he does another business deal, another business partnership, it's there, it's in the social, it's continuous. You're hearing about it all the time. And that's how to do it right. I'm the fool that reposts it and reshares it. But I think that's my role, to show people that it's okay to celebrate the gains of others. Why? Because if others do well, then the pie widens. And if the pie widens, then it creates a platform for others to keep on doing well. And you're a part of that. I don't know, I'll ask you, have you seen returns in terms of interest because you're doing this podcast, or have you seen a platform?
Definitely. I mean, I'm 25 now, and just having the opportunity to be with people who are 15 years ahead of me, and look at what they've done and kind of deconstruct their life and their decisions and their, their big moments kind of thing. I feel like it's helped me a lot in that sense, and in my own internal vision, in my own internal goals. I think that's for sure. That's on a personal level, on a person-to-person basis. Because at the end of the day, okay, we're streaming online, but it's me and you here. We're having a chat, like nobody's listening.
Yeah, but the way I see you, for example, is you're comfortable with audiovisual. Right? For me to come on camera, it's one of the first times I'm doing it. So it's native to you. And then you're exploring with your Decentraland architects, right? So you've found this new opportunity in this blockchain gaming world, right? And maybe because you're 25, but you saw an opportunity and you just go for it. Why? Because you're a digital native.
I want to touch on that because this is something that people ask about, and they contradict a lot. Which is, have one startup, focus on it, and try make it work.
I'm not going to go and profess that there's the right formula. People have portfolios, and others focus on one and hit it out the park. I'm not going to tell you that
I think people need to dip their toes in a number of things.
Yeah.
They need to. You need to have because there's when you're building something, you're taking an idea and you're making the idea a reality.
Yeah.
And the more times you do that, you repeat that, even if the ideas when you implement them they fail, the easier it becomes each time.
Yeah, we have inherited this concept that jobs for life. I don't think so. I think the newer generations don't see it that way. One, because they are more prone to move. I think the statistics are showing that for millennials. And number two, I don't think businesses are going to survive that long. There are, of course, some businesses well-rooted, but other businesses, disruption is real. And you might have to reskill and relearn. And then you look at the emergence of crypto and blockchain and AI. Certain skills are going to become redundant. So, I think the more skills people learn, I think it's going to be for their benefit. So like an investor does well by diversifying their portfolio, I think even workers will do very well in diversifying their skill base, being able to be agile, to not only learn how to do different skills, but I think critically learn how to earn money in different ways. And going back to you, so what you do in the Central Architects is I don't understand it, all right? So I don't understand how you go ahead and buy a digital plot of land or thing, but I want to learn about that world. So how would I learn about that world? And if I had the money to invest, in new opportunities, so I invest through you, right? I'm excited about your prospect, and that's one of the ways to learn, from someone who's hands-on into it, because you can't just say it's not for me and ignore it. If these things are starting to affect a wider population of workers, and especially now you're starting to see the smart engineers, the smart game developers, the smart computer scientists no longer build an old school tech, but always have an element of blockchain, an element of crypto, an element of AI in everything they build. In the next 10, 15 years, everything that's purely analog, that doesn't have either a digital copy or a digital presence, I don't know. I would be worried. Like if I was a business manager and I don't have some 5 fingers firmly into the digital world, and you need young people like you who do it freely, without overthinking it. Maybe I'm still a bit old school in terms of I tried to build a profession before I experimented. Although, as we mentioned before, I just went for it, but that's just me. But if I'm so old school and I need to experiment, I can experiment vicariously by investing in your projects, and that's how I learn as an investor how to get involved in these projects.
I mean, there are a lot of angel investors. You've met a lot more than I have, for sure. Do you find that they are all in it for an ROI, or are they also in it for the thrill, for the education, for the?
So usually there are 3 layers, right? So you have friends and family who do it for you. Okay, they love you, they care for you, they believe you're doing it for the right reasons, so they have the money and they invest in you. Okay, so like within your region, maybe if it's not your parents, it's a rich uncle or a rich colleague of a family or something like that, right? So that's your immediate circle. Then what we need to start building systematically is the next layer, which are business angels. And business angels, we use the simple analogy at Go Beyond, which stuck with me, which is an angel has 2 wings, right? One wing is definitely financial, right? I'm investing and I hope to get a return. Now, because I'm playing with my private money, that is play money. So that play money, as long as it comes back within 3 to 5 years, hopefully with some returns, I'm happy. But more importantly, I want to see a technology come into fruition, or I want to learn about certain research that's being undertaken, which I don't have the time to build myself, right? So I give my money to a third party that's building, that I'm excited about, because there's always that personal element, you need to be excited about the tech and the solution that's being brought to market. And you invest for that reason, not just for the return on investment. The difference between... Then there are super angels. So super angels do what I mentioned about angel investors. So they're excited about tech, or they're excited about new solutions and new markets that emerge. But they do it systematically. It's their job. They're practically professionalized. So therefore, it's important that they get a return on investment. Why? Number 1, so they can make money. And number 2, because in order to raise the next fund, they need to show returns. So they need to always continuously show growth. What I do, venture capital, it's pure money management, right? So I'm taking third parties' money to invest in startups to return an investment, which is definitely higher than what you can get on the equity markets. But also for the risks that's involved, you probably need to be able to do much more than 8 to 10%. You need to even double that money, if not even triple that money. So that means that when a venture capitalist invests in your startup, you have to be ready to really grow aggressively. So if you're still trying to build and figure things out, maybe first in Malta, we need to learn how to take risks at the more regional level before we can already expect to have venture capitalists. Also, I don't think we have enough pool of talent yet for venture capitalists to be present on the island. To be looking at the island, why not? I mean, Bitcraft, I'm here, so in fact, I already took 3 opportunities to Bitcraft. There's another VC that's in the food space. So there are some, but again, it's not systemic.
Often we talk about timing and the people and the team as important factors for successful startups. It's also, I think, quite accepted that choosing the right industry affects quite a bit the success of the startup. From your perspective, which sectors are really hot right now that people should really look at?
I'm trying to figure this out for Malta, okay? And another reason why Malta Startup Space exists is for the market to come to me rather than me have to go to the market, right? So you you put the debate in with some fun startup posts and the interesting thing. And instead of you having to go and chase them on LinkedIn one by one, they all come to you. So every time someone starts up, like before, every 3 months, I would guess maybe 3 or 4 phone calls from entrepreneurs. Now I'm getting 1 or 2 a week, because of what I'm doing at Malta Startup Space. So I got the market to me, so to say.
What are you seeing from common teams?
So my initial thesis was that we should build what is organically sensible for Malta, like maybe tourism, maybe even construction, all this construction happening, maybe someone can figure out a way to optimize it, all right? It hasn't happened, at least as far as I know. Maybe sun, sea, something to do with the seaside, with maritime. I haven't seen that endemic type of startup emerge. Maybe this guy, Daniel Buhaja Flask, that's a bit endemic to Malta, but it hasn't happened continuously. What I am seeing happening is the clusters that exist in Malta. They start to create these second-generation engineers or second-generation entrepreneurs. So, as I mentioned earlier, the head of marketing of a gaming company now goes off to create a very interesting startup in SEO or in ad tech. So we need to understand what the clusters are that have been successful and start seeing what the next generation that's spinning out of them are interested in and building. So that's what's interesting. And I'm very interested to see what will come out of Altaro. Some maybe, their head of marketing, their head of tech or something decides, okay, I've seen how it's done at Altaro. Now it's my turn to try. And probably the first money in will be the C-suite of Altaro, the founders of Altaro, because they say, wow, this guy helped me build my company. Now it's my turn to give back. So we'll start seeing that first opportunity. Same for Hotjar. I'm sure if a top manager at Hotjar leaves Hotjar to build something exciting and fun, they live on good terms. First person that's going to invest is probably going to be the founding team of Hotjar. I'd like to think so. And if he invests, believe me, or his friends or his group of friends are going to invest as well. So that's where my hope is.
But it's like a simple question, but is it really difficult to raise money?
I think the answer is yes. It's very difficult unless you know how to do it, right? I believe you need to be very structured in the way you approach it. Let me give an example why. So let's say, 5 or 6 people in your life who have real money, all right? So real money. Now, the question is, one, are they interested in tech, right? Because if they're not interested in tech, maybe they invest in you personally. Now, let's say I have, someone who does like tech, genuinely interested in startups, but you go up to them and you say, okay, I'm starting a startup. I'm like, no, I'm sorry. Like, I just bought a new house. I'm renovating. Now is not the time. Or, my wife, my wife's pregnant. Or now is not the right time. Timing is important as well. So what I feel you need to learn how to do, and I really believe it's a muscle, is that if you know 5 people, you speak to them and maybe 2 are interested. Those 2, if the likelihood is they're not going to invest directly, but at least they can introduce you to another 3 people each. So now you have 6. But they came as a warm introduction, right? And a warm introduction to someone who hopefully can take you to the next step. Again, if even this second layer doesn't invest, they might introduce you yet to another layer. So all of a sudden you go from 6 to 10 people you've contacted. And then those 10, again, if they come through a warm introduction and you know your stuff and you have a really exciting opportunity, they will introduce you to other people. But you need to appreciate the momentum, right? So if you talk to a few people and you're not getting that momentum, you're not exciting people so much so that they recommend you to other people, or it's like a no-brainer that they need to recommend you. Because don't forget, if I recommend a great startup to you, I'm going to win social capital. So let's imagine you're a billionaire investor and I recommend a great startup to you. I mean, I'm your buddy now, I made you make money. So it's in people's interest to recommend great startups, but people need to be excited about that startup, when they hear about it. They want to be involved.
That's an interesting one. Especially you mentioned social capital. Second time I heard it from a guest on the show, and I think that's why I think a lot of members of Malta Startup Space need to be more active, because by being active, you kind of build social capital, at least with our little community that we have.
Yeah, but saying things that obviously make sense and that help others take steps forward, right? That's what builds the social capital, right? So when I receive pitch decks, they kind of assume that I'm going to read the pitch deck and already open up my Rolodex and start introducing them to investors. No, you have to build a rapport. You have to make sure the technology, I mean, I don't know how to assess the technology, but the technology is built in some real true insights, They're really aggressively looking at a market that there is an opportunity there. The team is well-rounded, is well-built. They've had some previous successes. So I just bought a book, for example, that looked at 30,000 startups, and basically it said you have a higher likelihood to succeed if you had a previous success. Now, not a home run success, but at least you've built a company from 1 to 10, or you've successfully led a project or something like that. So these are the things that you look at. You build confidence. So and then when you introduce that startup to a third party, you know how to introduce it. You know how to bring out the value proposition. And if I introduce you, deep tech investor, health tech investor, it's because your startup is in that space. Many times I get people pitch to me, things in biotech or in health tech. I mean, I don't know those spaces. It's a bit of a waste of a conversation. You have to be strategic about how you go about the process. I really believe it's a muscle, and there's a lot of failure along the way, but all you need is 1 or 2 yeses, because if one of those 2 yeses mean a check, you've hit your target,
A couple of weeks ago, I brought up a post about the jar of sand. And the jar of sand, of course, you have the big rocks that are your priorities, and then you have the sand that fills up the space. In the next few months, quarter two, is it quarter two that would be? Yes,
Yeah.
quarter two. What are your 3 big rocks?
For me, predominantly, it's without a doubt the journey I'm having with Bitcraft, right? Because that's what I'm putting my heart and soul in. There's so much opportunity for me personally. The team is great. You meet very interesting people. I'm learning a lot, both in terms of how to build a venture capital portfolio, how to manage the needs and demands of that portfolio, but I'm learning how investment happens in the venture space in the US versus in Europe, massive learnings there, how to think big. That's probably, I'm thinking of my CFO laughing at the moment, saying, because I think small, so I'm learning how to think big and really look at big markets without a doubt, it's one massive big rock. But one thing I learned when I left Go Beyond is that you cannot leave with nothing, because then you have nothing. So these side projects like Malta Startup Space and then my personal consultancy. So Malta Startup Space, the rock there is to continue adding more people who contribute great content, right? So I'm trying to reach out to people who have built interesting content and maybe tell them, listen, do it a bit more raw, a bit more authentic, but come and do it in Malta Startup Space. Learn how to take chances even with your content. So that's what I'm working on for Malta Startup Space. And for my personal consultancy, it's what I do on the surface, so to say, is I help startups raise money. But my end game there is I want to learn how to work alongside investors to help them build portfolios of investments. So if you're a high net worth individual and you want to contribute to startups and you're excited about blockchain, excited about AI, excited about video games, excited about digital entertainment, we can together work on a strategy on how to build up your personal portfolio. So those are my big rocks, and that's what I focus on. So I've become quite efficient at avoiding the sand. I've learned quite well how to focus on the big rocks.
You got some books for that?
I do read a lot, but no, at the moment my reading is a lot of blog space, right? Because there's a lot of new stuff happening in the digital space, in the games world, and the blockchain space that you need blogs for now. There haven't been these salient books that everyone has to read. So you learn a lot through blogs and through opinion posts. And for example, so what about you? Someone young, energetic, digital native. What are you looking at in terms of the next phases?
When I started 2021, I looked back at 2020 and I'm like, what a waste of a year, because I spent a lot of time just almost paralyzed. I had my business was in tourism, that was gone, So I had set a goal, 5 startups before 25, and I'm on track to get there in some way. Of course, it's a personal goal, so obviously there's no real definition of did I reach it, did I not. But over the next 2-3 months, I'm just going to continue building a great team of 3D modelers and game developers, continuing to learn about new marketing channels. So one thing I did this week was put up virtual billboards. You know, there's traffic like you have in the real world and billboards, and there's people who are using their Decentraland properties just as billboards, and you can advertise through a network. I'm learning about lots of new channels and new jargon as well in the whole game development space.
But like you mentioned that, for example, at the time of recording, there was quite an infamous crypto dip in the market. And all of a sudden, people use the dip to take a plunge into do like Decentraland. So like, how did that affect you, for example?
No, I mean, the dip was scary because obviously I have not obviously, but I have some holdings. So you see that just wipe, drop by half overnight. But I've been through a dip before, which was 2017. So that didn't shake me too much because I had made a mistake and pulled out then. But what I was very curious is, how is this dip going to affect property prices? Will the property price remain in dollars, and the cost of Ethereum goes up?
And when we say property here, we're saying digital property,
metaverse property. So this is virtual world property. And what happened, at least in the past few days, is that a lot of people were buying property. They're snapping up these deals. New owners, or people who are already in the space, or people who were priced out before and now they can afford it. So that's more work for me, because we have new people in the space who want to develop their shop, their gallery, their casino, whatever. So that was good, and that's kind of why I wanted to go inside of offering a service to the crypto community, because I thought, hey, if I'm offering a service, volatility doesn't affect me. At the end of the day, I'm charging in euros for my product.
I'm very excited about this world that. Okay, you're seeing it in terms of the application layer, right? So how can I build services and provide business on top of that? But what we're seeing, like, for example, in the venture capital world is, or at least my experience, is people who used to build maybe more traditional analog businesses, the engineers and the computer scientists and the game designers and things like that, have now all shifted to including definitely an element of AI and machine learning. That's kind of a given now. That there's so much knowledge being built, and being shared, that those layers are in. And then they're building on top, or trying to figure out like how to create utility inside this new world, which is governed by these protocols of cryptography and blockchain. But what I've noticed in the last few years is that the smart brains are doing that, right?
I don't think I'm exceptionally intelligent or anything like that. Like you mentioned, I'm good on video and camera. I tend to be okay in real life as well. So I feel like I'm just playing to my strength, which is people, relationships. I'm connecting with really smart, talented developers from all over the world. Making sure that they trust me, that they respect me, I respect them. And doing that in the best way possible. Yeah,
and there's like a misconception about the social aspect of these worlds, and actually they're highly sociable and highly engaging. And when you add elements of, in the future, you're going to start having VR headsets in which to do them rather than on a screen and with a mouse. They're going to be tactile.
There's a place for everyone, because sometimes I feel like when I talk about virtual worlds and the metaverse, an artist will just be like, how does it apply to me? Well, that's the most obvious one. In NFT galleries, you can sell your digital art. But I think that everyone's going to find their space, from doctors to accountants they will have jobs that they can do in these virtual cities.
Yeah.
And I think that's quite exciting at the moment, because a lot of them have not really been uncovered or deployed yet, and we're seeing the start.
That's what we see. That, for example, the younger generation. So I grew up with video games, right? I don't call myself a gamer, so I'm not the type of person who spends hours trying to perfect a game. Although my wife will dispute that a little bit when it comes to football video games, but I haven't dedicated a significant portion of my life, but I am comfortable in the world, and the fact that there's going to be a world very soon where you earn your living inside a game or inside a virtual environment, I get it. I'm fine with it. It's within my comfort zone. And, we talk about disruption. I think that's where the disruption is going to be. So in these virtual worlds that seemingly initially look like a game, but you have a whole two generations, millennials and Gen Zs, who basically are comfortable in their skin there. and creates incredibly interesting dynamics in terms of personal identity. One day I'm an avatar and I'm at war, and then another day I'm at a rock concert or a rap concert, in a different environment. And the younger generation are comfortable doing that. So if there's attention, back to audience, full loop over here. If that's where the audience is, then that's where the business opportunities are gonna be. And if you don't have a hand into that, you're gonna miss probably the next big wave of technology opportunity, i.e. also business opportunity, just because you're not conversational in these worlds.
My biggest fear is growing old and losing touch with technology. You have a biggest fear?
No, my biggest fear, I don't know. I didn't come prepared with a philosophical hat on. But but that's why I'm excited, because it creates interesting dynamics that didn't exist before, So on Twitter, I'm one persona. On LinkedIn, I'm another persona. On Facebook, I'm another persona. Throw that into a digital world where I'm even more immersed because I have my VR headset on and I'm actually, really getting different emotions in a 360-degree world that I'm really immersed in. What will that mean in terms of what I can do? And all of a sudden, I can be a race car driver, and I can, bet on a football game, and then I can go to a hotel, and I can go to an art gallery, instantly.
That's it. I also say an important part of it is the pseudonymity. So obviously in real world, people judge each other based on age. Age is quite a big one as well. Sometimes people don't take you seriously because you're too young, or maybe you don't look like a tech person because
whatever. Gender gap.
The gender gap, all of these things, and the pseudonymity online is fantastic because of that as well. It really removes barriers completely.
Yeah, and what I think the internet, the emergence of the internet in the business world brought for the last 20 years. I think it's going to be games and immersive worlds, and the infrastructure is going to be blockchain and crypto, where everything is automated, everything is interconnected. So you don't need to go to the bank to withdraw money to be able to pay Charlie. It's I did this transaction, ergo this happens, and the transaction happens. Your ledger is updated, my ledger is updated. The tools are there. It's happening. Get interested.
That's a good message to finish off with. Get interested. Get into whatever industry excites you. Spend some hours just YouTubing and Googling whatever is you don't know, and I think that's how you make things happen.
Yeah, and even
in
back
today's world.
Very quickly, back to family businesses, Malta, the older generation, I get it, you're not going to get it. Of course, I understand that. But if you have a next generation person coming up in the business and they have all these ideas around tech, digital, even games, listen out, because that's where the business is, that's where the audience is, and that's where the attention is. If you have attention and eyeballs, you have business.
That's it. Anything you want to finish off with?
Your famous question at the end. Anything we didn't think about? No, let's do reclam. Please join Malta Startup Space.
Join it, meet us there, talk to us there.
We're only there for a conversation, nothing more.
Ask questions.
Make mistakes and post things that interest you. Because if you're interested, Digital Likelihood is many others are interested, and that's what it's all about.
That's great. Thanks for coming again, Adrian. And thank you as well for your support and advice over the past few months and the past few weeks as well.
Yeah, it's been a pleasure, and Negozju is a great show to follow.
Hey, thank you. Good night. Ciao.